Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. This is SoCal Slow Cones, and today I just wanted to go over the motorcycle collision study and the data that you've probably never heard of, and you probably should have heard of, because there's a lot of really good and important information in here. The study is called the HURT study. It was done in the 80s, and they basically took collision data involving motorcycles and compiled it into a report and some synopsized findings about the data. And based upon my personal and professional experience, these points that they found in their findings are still very much relevant today. Still see the same mistakes, the same findings that they have here in this report. They're still happening today, and I don't know why. It's been 40 some odd years, but I wanted to go over it because it might give you some insight on what we can do to keep ourselves safe while we're out there on the road, because it's hard to enjoy a ride if you're not being safe, and if your ride leads to you getting in an accident or getting hit by a car or something. So basically the report is about 450 pages-ish, and at the end, they compiled all the data into just a list of findings to make it brief and easy to understand and what they gleaned from all the data. And the findings are still several dozen. I think there's 60, 70 or something. But I just wanted to go through it, and I have quite a few pages here. So we'll talk about some of the points, and I hope we can all get something out of this. So it starts off, section 12.1, the findings. Throughout the accident and exposure data, there are special observations which relate to accident and injury causation and characteristics of the motorcycle accident studied. So basically, this is their observations based upon the data. About 3/4 of the motorcycle accidents involve collisions with other vehicles, usually a passenger automobile, and about 1/4 were single vehicle, basically solo motorcycle accidents. Okay, and it says in the single vehicle accidents, motorcycle rider error was present as the accident precipitating factor in about 2/3 of the cases, with the typical error being a slide out and fall due to over braking or running wide on a curve due to excess speed or under cornering. Okay, so this is where your braking comes into play. When was the last time any of us went out and practiced your emergency braking or braking, period? It's important to know the capabilities not only of yourself but of your motorcycle too. If you're coming into a corner hot, are you confident that you're going to be able to bleed off enough speed to make the corner? Or are you going to be running wide? Are you confident in being able to lean your bike and knowing the limits of the lean? Are you confident in your body position? Are you going to under corner and go off the road, right? So all of this is all going to come back to get out and train, right? Find somebody that knows what they're doing, that can walk the walk and talk the talk and can guide you safely through these exercises and help you increase your safety and build your skills so you're not one of these findings. Okay. Another point, the failure of motorists to detect and recognize motorcycles in traffic is the predominating cause of motorcycle accidents. So what does that mean? We have to be visible, right? I know it's not fun to be the nerd wearing high-vis gear, reflective safety vest, etc., but the fact of the matter is drivers don't see us, okay? So you have to do whatever you can to be visible, whether it's adding auxiliary lights to your bike, even if it's a sport bike, find a way, okay? During the day, ride with your high beams on. Get a brightly colored helmet at least. Usually your helmet's the highest point on your bike is your head. So get white, high-vis yellow, some other color that stands out, okay? There's a data point in here about windshields. Motorcycles with windshields and fairings are much more likely to be seen by drivers and less likely to be in accidents because they're more conspicuous out on the road. They present a bigger picture and they're more likely to get somebody's attention. An interesting point, deliberate hostile action by a motorist against a motorcycle rider is a rare accident cause. Okay. And I see a lot of videos on YouTube, and there's a lot of blaming the driver for some of these incidents that you see, when in reality, a lot of it is motorcyclists just riding like shit, to be quite honest. And yeah, people get irritated when they see, the motorcyclist lane splitting at 90 miles an hour on the freeway. But very rarely are we going to find that there's an actual deliberate, thoughtful action against a motorcyclist. Like a driver actually goes out of their way to run somebody down. Okay? The most frequent accident configuration is the motorcycle proceeding straight, and then the automobile makes a left turn in front of the oncoming motorcycle. Intersections are the most likely place for motorcycle accidents. So one thing I go over with all the people that I coach and train is clear all of your intersections. As you approach, whether it's a four-way, major intersection with traffic control signals, or whether you're riding through a neighborhood just with intersecting cross streets, clear your intersection. As you're approaching, look left, look right, look left again as you're going through, and try and see as far down the street as you can. So if somebody's running a red light, if somebody's running a stop sign, if they're coming through, clear those intersections so you can be aware of it and already be planning an escape route or a plan of action should that happen, whether it's braking, whether it's accelerating, if you can beat the car, if it's swerving, if it's stopping and doing a U-turn, whatever it might be, have that plan of action mapped out in your head. Most motorcycle accidents actually just involve a short trip, whether it's to go get groceries, visit a friend. I think it's within like 10 miles of leaving your house or coming back, or leaving your wherever you're leaving from, right? Or your destination, okay? So we need to be extra vigilant as we're leaving and approaching our destinations. I think that's a lot to do with complacency. We think, oh, we're just leaving, nothing can possibly happen to me a couple blocks from my house. Nothing could possibly happen to me when I'm a mile away from my home and I'm almost there, and we kind of let our guard down. And that's when mistakes happen. Something to note here, the median pre-crash speed was 29.8 miles an hour, and the median crash speed was 21.5 miles an hour. So the speed that most motorcyclists were going was less than 30 miles an hour, and it was about 21 miles an hour when they actually hit an object or a vehicle. The 1 in 1,000 crash speed is about 86 miles an hour. The typical motorcycle pre-crash line of sight to the traffic hazard, about 3/4 of that of all accident hazards are within 45 degrees of either side of straight ahead, right? So if you're looking straight ahead, 45 degrees to either side is where the hazard is going to come from that causes motorcycle collisions. And most of those collisions are going to happen at a speed less than 30 miles an hour, right? So, you see a lot of the posturing on social media about, well, I don't need to train, I'm never going to have to do a figure eight out on the roads, or I'm never going to have to do a 16-foot U-turn out on the road, right? Well, these people ride on the freeways and they equate X amount of miles or X amount of years riding with experience and skill, and that's just not true, and it's a dangerous assumption that you've been riding X amount of miles or whatever and you know what you're doing, because I can almost guarantee you don't. And I've seen it time and time again with people that I've trained that have been riding a long time, and they have a really hard time making a U-turn that would even happen out on a 2-lane road. It's a humbling experience for some people. But where this comes into play, right, is if most of our crashes are less than 30 miles an hour and they're happening directly in front of us, we need to practice swerving. We need to practice emergency braking. We need to be able to stop and do U-turns to then avoid hazards coming from behind us, right? Avoiding a collision in front of us is great, but it does us no good if we're just stopped and then we're unable to make a U-turn on a 2-lane road, say, and somebody comes and sandwiches us from behind, right? So these are skills that are important to practice because it all goes into keeping us safe and avoiding these collisions. The motorcycle riders involved in accidents are essentially without training. 92% were self-taught or learned from family or friends. Motorcycle rider training experience reduces accident involvement and is related to reduced injuries in the event of accidents, right? Get out and train. Find somebody that knows what they're doing in your area and get out and train. Okay, your uncle that's been riding 40 years but has done all freeway riding and has never practiced a U-turn or emergency braking might be great to teach you how to get going. Terrible advice as far as like safety and everything. You need to take it upon yourself to get out and work on your skills. And the most important part is, even if you're going to get in an accident, having that training might mitigate a lot of the injuries that you're going to receive, right? If you can't emergency brake and you're going 40 miles an hour and you barely slow down to say 35 miles an hour before broadsiding a car, you're going to be injured. It's going to be pretty bad. But if you have the skills and you've practiced your emergency braking and you're going 40 miles an hour and you're able to slow down before you impact a car or an object or whatever to say 20 miles an hour, your injuries are going to be far less severe than they would have been if you had no training and you had an extra 15 miles an hour. Injury severity increases exponentially with speed, right? So there's no downside to getting out and training. I don't know why you wouldn't want to do this and have the skills to be able to mitigate injuries and possibly just to avoid accidents altogether. So lack of attention to the driving task is a common factor for the motorcyclist in an accident. So even though this was done in the 80s, I think this is even more relevant today in 2024, right? Lack of attention to the driving task is a common factor for the motorcyclist in an accident. What do we have today, right? Almost everybody's out there with their 360 cameras. They have a cell phone on the handlebars. There's all kinds of distractions. They're looking at their friend with the Moto Loot helmet cover that looks like a unicorn riding down the freeway, right? Tons of distractions out there, and we're bringing it on ourselves. We're more worried about what's going on and getting the right film to upload to TikTok or whatever it might be than focusing on what's on the road. I'm not saying that you can't, but we have to be mindful of the distractions that we're introducing when we're riding and the attention that they're taking away from what's going on in front of us and out on the road, right? Half of the fatal accidents show alcohol involvement. That goes without saying. Don't drink and ride, period. Don't do it. You shouldn't be drinking and driving, and you certainly shouldn't be drinking and riding. Motorcycle riders in these accidents showed significant collision avoidance problems. Most riders would overbrake and skid the rear wheel and underbrake the front wheel, greatly reducing collision avoidance deceleration. The ability to countersteer and swerve was essentially absent. I already touched on it. You got to work on emergency braking. You got to work on your swerving skills, right? The rear brake is not going to stop you. I can guarantee it. I practiced it in the wet. I practiced it in the dry. I've used front brake only, I've done rear brake only, and I've combined them. The rear brake will not stop you. And if you go to think about it, you need to rely on the front brake. That's where almost all of your stopping power is. Minimum 70% of your stopping power is a front brake. And if you're relying only on the rear brake, sure, maybe it's 10 feet further than using your front brake only or combining the brakes, right? But that 10 feet can make the difference between you hitting the side of a car and not. Every foot could be that difference between you getting in an accident and you being safe and avoiding it, right? And swerving, right? When was the last time we practiced swerving at speed? Have you set up cones and gone through them at like 30 miles an hour and practiced your counter and practiced your swerving skills, right? When was the last time that we've done that? Probably not a lot. So we should probably get out there and do it, and let's do it at real world speeds, right? There's a difference between turning the bars, right, at low speeds, which is another skill to practice. And then there's a difference between that and going, say, 25, 30 miles an hour and pushing right to go right, pushing left to go left, and actually practicing that swerving at speed. It's a much different feeling and it's a different technique. Typical motorcycle accident allows the rider about 2 seconds to complete your collision avoidance action. So you have about 2 seconds to not only perceive a threat, but make a decision and avoid it, okay? So how can we mitigate some of that, right? Look further ahead, clear your intersections. If you're coming up to a street and you can see, 100 feet down there and see that a car is coming, maybe slow down a little bit, right? Perceive that threat and already start acting on it just in case. If nothing happens, great, you can continue on your ride. That's best case scenario. But you need to be aware, and we need to keep our eyes up and looking ahead, not focused on distractions, not focused on anything else. We got to pay attention. Motorcycle color has very little to do with accidents. But your frontal surfaces, the front of your motorcycle, is the most visible and important thing that would catch a driver's attention, right? Motorcycles equipped with fairings and windshields are underrepresented in accidents, most likely because of the contribution of conspicuity and the association with more experienced and trained riders. So ride with your high beams on during the day. Get auxiliary lights, maybe make them yellow. Yellow seems to stand out a lot more in traffic. Do whatever you can to make the front of your bike the most noticeable thing on the road, right? It'll help you be safer. I also think, with the windshield and the fairings and the amount that riders train, I do think that there is some kind of stigma with especially the sport bike riders. You ride a smaller bike, smaller windshield, less conspicuous, slimmer profile, and they also seem to be the folks that have some kind of stigma around getting out and doing cone patterns and training, right? Yet all the data that we have here in this study is showing that they're far more likely to be involved in an accident with all these factors when you add them up, right? Likelihood of injury is extremely high in these motorcycle accidents. 98% of the multiple vehicle collisions and 96% of the single vehicle accidents resulted in some kind of injury to the motorcycle rider, and 45% resulted in more than a minor injury. Again, it goes without saying you're gonna get injured if you get in an accident, so why don't we work on avoiding them? And if we can't avoid them, let's mitigate the damage, right? Injury severity increases with speed, alcohol involvement, and motorcycle size. So say you start out on, your 600 cc bike, right? You've been riding for a while, maybe you trained a little bit, and you're like, cool, now I'm ready for a bigger bike. You go and you get the 1000 cc or the 1500 cc cruiser or whatever, right? The training doesn't stop. As a matter of fact, it's even more important. You have more power, you have more speed. It's going to take you longer to slow down, obviously, when you're going faster, right? So as you increase and you get bigger bikes, that's the time to increase your training, right? It should be even more important now that you're getting these bigger motorcycles. The most deadly injuries to the accident victims were injuries to the chest and head, right? Wear a helmet. Wear good gear. They have some gear that has, chest padding in it and everything. Safety helmet use caused no attenuation of critical traffic sounds, no limitation of pre-crash visual field, and no fatigue or loss of attention. No element of accident causation was related to helmet use. Okay? Remember, 45 degrees to each side of center is where the majority of our hazards are going to come. I can guarantee you a helmet does not obstruct that vision. At those angles, and you turn your head just a little bit to clear intersections, and you're getting almost to 90 degrees for either side. There's no real reason not to wear a helmet. Helmeted riders and passengers showed significantly lower head and neck injury for all types of injury and at all levels of injury severity. There's no liability for neck injury by wearing a safety helmet. Helmeted riders had less neck injuries than unhelmeted riders. Only 4 minor injuries were attributed to helmet use, and in each case, the helmet prevented possible critical or fatal head injury, right? So even people that were injured wearing a helmet They had a relatively minor injury that prevented it from being a fatality by wearing the helmet. Okay. Recommendations here in the study. The first one, right? Training. The majority of riders interviewed were untrained and had learned whatever they knew about motorcycles from their own experience or from family and friends. This lack of training was a significant factor in accident involvement, and it is clear that motorcycle riders benefit greatly from such specialized training and could develop important skills, strategies, and attitudes to limit accident involvement and reduce injury severity. There you go. Get out and train. Don't just rely on your friend that has done very little training themselves to teach you the ropes and then takes you out on the road, and next thing you know, you guys are screaming down the freeway going 90 miles an hour, and you have very little idea how to get yourself out of a situation and very little skills to do so, even if you were to figure it out, right? Get out there, spend a month just working on your skills, your bike handling, ride around your neighborhood, get intimately familiar with your motorcycle and its capabilities before you go out there and do that. Find a qualified professional in your area to help you. I teach in the San Diego County area. I don't even charge anything right now, and I just want to help people ride safer. Okay, find somebody that can do that and really walk you through it and build that proficiency before you go out there and you're attempting something. Right? Motorcycling is dangerous. It can kill us. And you can never train too much for something that'll kill you. All right. One fundamental communication system is available through the motorcycle rider under citations for traffic violations. The data of this research show that driver improvement is vital to those motorcycle riders who have had traffic violations or accidents. And actually, in the study, I didn't highlight it, but it shows that those riders that have been cited for traffic violations or have already been in accidents are far more likely to be involved in a fatal accident than those that haven't. Okay, so if you get stopped, just take the cite and then reflect on how your riding caused whatever that was. Maybe it's an equipment violation, not a big deal, right? But if you're getting stopped for speed, unsafe lane changes, any kind of running a red light, et cetera, right? Reflect on that, right? How did that affect your riding, and how could that have affected your safety? Okay, and then go out and improve on it. Okay. Helmets, again, provide a spectacular reduction of head and neck injury without any adverse effects on vision or hearing or vulnerability for other injuries. This research shows no reason for any motorcyclist to be without a safety helmet. The traditional heavy jacket, gloves, pants, and boots are clearly effective in reducing the most common abrasions. An important improvement would be to ensure that the upper torso garment be an effective contribution to conspicuity, right? So let's wear our gear. It's going to prevent some road rash. Wear your helmet. It's going to prevent injuries with very little downside. Helmet is not going to be detrimental to your vision, to your hearing out on the road, or anything like that. And if you're going to wear gear, try and buy something that's going to stand out. Get white, get something reflective with retro-reflective accents. Get something high vis, make yourself stand out so that you're visible to people out on the road. You have to be seen. One of the most frequent cases was truly that of the other vehicle driver failing to detect the motorcycle in traffic. In such cases, it was clear that the increased conspicuity would reduce accident involvement. I literally just saw a video on Instagram today where a rider was doing 110 miles an hour on the freeway and weaving in and out of cars. There wasn't a lot of traffic. It wasn't like lane splitting or anything, but weaving in and out of cars, and they could have sworn that a car intentionally moved closer to the white line as if they were going to change lanes, and were pissed at the driver. Okay? And absolutely in the comments defended their actions and absolved themselves of any responsibility for their riding. Okay? It is very hard for people to judge how fast motorcycles are closing a gap and how fast they're coming towards you, especially in a rear view mirror. Okay? They might see you and then they look back. By the time they check their mirror again, you're 100 yards down the road, if not more. Okay? And especially if you're going 110, somebody turns on a turn signal, they see you in the distance, and then they start changing lanes. You've traveled a really long distance in that amount of time, and it's not the driver's fault. I think we've gotten into this cycle, especially prevalent on social media, where riders ride like morons, and everything's blamed on the driver. Like, we can just go out there and do whatever we want. If we get hit or something happens, it's the driver's fault, 100%. That's not the case, right? We have to take responsibility for ourselves, because the one guy that's going out there and doing that and riding like that is making drivers irritated at all the other motorcyclists. They don't pick individuals out, and they're not only going to be mad at that one, they're now going to think that the rest of the riders out there are just as big assholes on the road as that one person that passed them like that one day, right? We have to take responsibility for our riding and for our actions and the way we're conducting business out there on the road. And I don't mean be a safety Sally. Go have fun, but do it responsibly. And if something happens, own it, right? It's not always the driver's fault. Sure, yes, it is. And a lot of this data says that drivers turn in front of us all the time, and that's a big cause for collisions. But, at some point, it becomes our responsibility to ride safer and to be seen, to practice our skills and everything. We can't be going 110 and weaving in and out of cars and then blame the car that changes lanes, and it may not even be intentional. Like I said, they could check their mirror, see you way back there, and then start their lane change, but you're going so fast that they don't have any time to react. So keep that in mind. The point of all this, right? The point of all this study is to get out there and train. Work on your skills, work on your life-saving skills. Find somebody in your area that can help and teach you and kind of guide you, safely through it. Work on your visibility too. Helmet. It's usually the highest point on your bike is your head. Get a bright colored helmet. The front of your bike is going to be the most visible thing to drivers. Ride with your high beams on during the day. Get auxiliary lighting for your bike. Okay? Do whatever you can to make yourself stand out. And ultimately, sometimes shit happens. So that's where our training is going to come in, right? So practice your life-saving skills. Practice your swerving. Practice your emergency braking. Practice your turning. Practice, being able to move your head and eyes and not get target locked, right? Another thing with the slow speed stuff, it forces you to turn your head and eyes. If you can't turn your head and eyes and look where you want to go when you're going 5 miles an hour, what makes you think you're going to be able to do it when you're going 80, right? If you get target locked on the car that turns out in front of you and you just stare straight at the side of it, guess what? You're going to hit the side of the car, okay? We got to stop, be able to turn those head and eyes and get out of the way. So drop some comments down there, what you think of the data and everything, and some of the talking points. I'd love to talk about it and get this discussion going. If you want to look it up for yourself, it's the HURT study. I highly suggest you read it and go over the findings and kind of check off the boxes as to what you're already doing to keep yourself safer. And get out there and train. All right? Drop a like, subscribe, and drop a comment so we can have a discussion about this. Cool. SoCal Slow Cones, let me know if you like training in the San Diego County area, and look forward to seeing you out there. Thanks.